Right, good afternoon, guys. I hope you are doing well and you're having a good day. I just quickly want to let you know you will not have class tomorrow. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go through the next test, and I will also tell you your test date in your email that I will send you. And I will also just give you some details and basically go through the test and make sure that you have the focus points. Um, so I'm going to put my camera off so that I can share with you guys. All right, so I'm going to quickly share with you. If you go on your ETA portal on your anatomy and physiology module, you will see way down at the bottom, you'll see your assessment tasks. We finished our test, the first one, Anin test 1, and we also finished Anin test 2. You guys are in the process of finishing your logbooks, which is 10% of your overall mark for this module. Then we have a big one that's coming, which is your Anin task 3. And this one is 60% of your overall mark for this course. So it's not for this course, sorry, for this module. So this one is super important. And if you didn't do as well in these two, you can really catch up on your marks here. So I want you guys to use this to your advantage for when you are studying, thinking about your overall mark. This is a lot of, it's 60%. So you need to really go for this one. All right. So just to quickly show you guys, when you go into this one, this is the focus point. I'm not telling you this is the only things that you're going to get in this test, but I am just touching on some of the important points that I want you guys to go back on. All right, just make sure that you remember that this Anand test 3 is about section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all of them. All right, you have to go through the online lesson recordings. Um, so it's very important that you use the time to study for this. All right. So when we go into the actual test, it's very important that you know the difference between the 3 different planes of your body. All right. So I want you to make sure that you go through this again, because I find in the previous test that you guys get confused with the sagittal and the coronal, the frontal plane. So make sure that you know the sagittal plane, it's dividing the body in a right and a left part. Frontal plane dividing the body in a front and a back part. And the transverse plane dividing the body in a top and a bottom half. There. So here is the explanation again. Make sure you know this, all right, because you're going to get it in the test. Then I also want you to focus on the different movements of the body, all right? You need to know the definitions of these movements, all right? Flexion, yeah? Flexion is most now decreasing the angle between two structures. Extension means increasing the angles between two structures. So make sure that you don't get confused with those two, because some of you did in your previous test. You need to know the difference between adduction and abduction. All right, go study that. It's important. You also need to know the difference between supination and pronation, dorsiflexion and plantarflexion. I'm telling you guys now, this is going to be in your test. So don't let, this is easy one. So go back to when we did these work and study the specific definitions of this. All right. Then you need to make sure that you know the directional terminology. All right. So when we're talking about something in the front of your body, we mean anterior. So sometimes in the test, it will give you a picture and it will tell you, is this muscle in the anterior or the posterior of your body? So let's take, for instance, the latissimus dorsi muscle. All right. First, you need to know where this muscle is. There. Now, if you looking it on your body, is it anterior to your body or is it posterior to your body? All right. This latissimus dorsi muscle is your back muscle. So yes, it is posterior. So you need to know the difference, the different directional terminology. All right. Then another focus point for us is you need to know that this is your spinal cord. This is your spinal column, and it consists of vertebra stacked one on top of the other one. All right. So when they talk about vertebra, it's important that you know where they are and how do they look. Can you guys see? This is how they look. Right? You need to know this vertebra here. This is the body, and this is the spinous process. This is towards the back, towards the posterior of your body, where this one, the body part, is towards the anterior part of your body. So you need to know what is the anterior part and what is the posterior part. Okay? How does it go? So this is the posterior, and this one is the anterior of your body. Right. And then you also need to know the difference between the axial and the appendicular skeleton. I was so disappointed because some of you guys didn't get this one right, and it is one that we focused on when we went through the work. Right. And then make sure you also know the difference between lordosis and kyphosis. All right. Go and see what is the difference between the two. And then also make sure that you know the classification types of the bones. All right. A bone has a name, right? And then it also have it that bone will be in a specific classification. It will be divided in a specific classification. So if we, for instance, look at, let's have a look here. This is your arm bone. Eh? So this is the humerus. All right. When you look at this picture here, this is a picture of a clavicle or the collarbone. So that's the name of the bone. Humerus is the name, and that's the clavicle. That's the name of the bone. But this also gets subdivided into a classification. And the 5 classifications is long bones, short bones, irregular bones, sesamoid bones, and your flat bones. So you need to know which bones fit in with what classification. So for instance, when we look at the vertebra, which this is the vertebra, where do they fit in what classification do they fit in? Is it a long bone? Is it a short bone? Is it an irregular bone? Is it a sesamoid bone? Or is it a flat bone? So it's important that you know. Né? Also, you also need to take note of the different parts of your spinal cord. Né? So you need to know this is the cervical part, and you need to know how many vertebrae does each part consist of. Right? The thoracic part consists of 12. So you can see how much vertebra does each one of these parts consist of, and what is the name of each of these parts. So when I say sacral, coccygeal part of the spine, you need to, it is these ones here. So it's these 9 ones at the bottom of your spine, and it is 9 that is fused together. Yeah? So it's not loose vertebra, they are fused together. All right, so this is very important. Can you guys remember this table? All right, this is the definitions. That's also very, very important. So you need to know origin and insertion should be a part of your terminology now. Né? This is a new language that you are learning. So this is what you need to definitely know. What is the difference between origin and insertion? All right. when do we call a muscle contraction isometric contraction? And when do we call it isotonic contraction? The difference between the two is basically the amount of movement that is there during the contraction. Remember, isometric is it means there's no movement, but there's still a contraction. And then isotonic is there, it's a contraction and there's movement that's taking place. And then this isotonic is subdivided into two parts. Concentric contraction, that's when the muscle shortens, and eccentric contraction, that is when the muscle lengthens. But I want you to go through that online lesson recordings again to make sure that you know the difference. Yeah, you also need to know what is an agonist and what is an antagonist muscle. What's the difference between the two? We need to talk about a fixator muscle. What is the function, definition of a fixator muscle, and what is a synergist muscle? All right, so for instance, when we talk about a synergist muscle, it is muscles that combine to perform the same anatomical function. So these muscles, the bicep brachialis and brachioradialis, all performs elbow flexion. Our prime mover is bicep brachialis and brachioradialis is your synergist muscle. So they are assisting the bicep brachii by doing the same anatomical movement, but just supporting and making the movement more controlled and flowy. Yeah? So that is an example of a synergist muscle. So you need to know the difference between it. Yeah? Then one of the big important muscles that you need to know and that you got in your first test is the pectoralis major. Please go through this again. Make sure that you know. Remember, when you look at this picture, the pectoralis major, is it on the posterior or the anterior part of your body? Right? Because it's on your chest area, it is in the anterior part of your body. It's also called your pecs. Okay? So this muscle inserts on this sternum here, and then it has three different fibers. Your upper fibers, your middle fibers, and then your lower fibers, and they all combine to come together, and they insert on the anterior part of your humerus. All right, so can you remember in Anin test 1, this was one of the questions. Some of you didn't get it right, so I need you guys to get this one. This is one of the easier ones. The pectoralis major is your main pushing muscle, né? And it also combines with the tricep brachii to push. All right, so it's all the major pushing muscles. When you're talking about different sports where you need this pushing muscle, we're talking about rugby, né? When you are running and you are pushing someone away from you, your pectoralis major muscle is working predominantly. And remember, so it's your pectoralis major and your tricep brachii that is causing that elbow extension movement. All right, so you need to know again, what is the joint that this muscle crosses, right? And what is the type of joint? So remember, the joint has a name, and then it also is one of the types. So there's also a type that it consists of, and this is the different types that this joint can be. Yeah? We spoke about the shoulder joint. We spoke about the little socket where the ball fits in. So it's a ball and socket joint. Yeah? And what is the movement action that takes place when we are doing this? Okay? What is the movement that takes place in your humerus? What is that humerus doing there? What is the movement that's taking place when we are going into that pushing movement? It's horizontal adduction and it's your shoulder flexion at the same time. All right, you also need to know, very important, that when muscles shorten, they contract. When they contract, they shorten. So they are pulling on a tendon that attaches onto your bone. So it's important to know tendons attached muscle to bone, and you need to know what ligaments is. Ligaments attach bone to bone. So you need to know the difference between the two, tendon and a ligament. All right. You also need to know the different big major muscles in your lower extremity. On the anterior part of your lower extremity, the upper leg, is the quadricep muscle groups. Quadriceps consist of 4 different muscles. And you also need to know what is the movement that this muscle is responsible for, right? Then also we need to know what is on the posterior part of our upper leg. Okay. The posterior part is your hamstring muscle group. Hamstring muscle group consists of 3 different muscles: bicep femoris, long and short head, semitendinosus, and your semimembranosus. And then you need to know which one of these, so which one of this group and which one of this group is the only ones that crosses the hip and the knee joint. All right, so the rectus femoris and the bicep femoris muscles of these groups is the only ones that crosses 2 joints, the hip and the knee joint. So then this means that these 2 muscles is the only 2 that is responsible for both knee and hip movement. So the vastus lateralis is not responsible for hip movement because it doesn't cross the hip. It only crosses the knee. So this vastus muscles, all 3 of them, all 3 of them, is responsible for knee movement. And remember, because it's on the anterior part of the upper leg, it is causing knee extension, right? And the rectus femoris is the only one that's causing knee extension and hip flexion. And this one, the same, semitendinosus does not cross the hip joint. So it only is responsible for knee flexion, right? And then the bicep femoris is responsible because it crosses the hip and the knee joint. It's responsible for knee flexion and hip extension. You need to know what is the muscles of the lower leg, all right? On the posterior part of your lower leg, it's your calf muscle, and the calf muscle consists of 2 muscles, the gastrocnemius and the soleus, all right? And these 2 muscles together cause plantar flexion. So you need to know what plantar flexion means. How does it look? So this is the anterior part of your upper leg, all right? It's your 3 muscles in your columns that you have to study, or where all your muscles is on that you have to study. This is just showing you where it is, all right? And this is the part of the table that has the hamstring muscles on. And then this is the lower leg, the posterior part of your lower leg. This is your gastrocnemius, and this is your soleus. All right, so when we are doing calf exercises, remember, this is when you're going on your toes, plantar flexion. So whenever you are going on your toes here, remember, this is resistance. So if you're going from this position to on your toes, you are going into plantar flexion. And your gastrocnemius and your soleus is predominantly working during this exercise. And this exercise is called a calf raise. So they're going to give you this exercise in the exam. So it's important to understand which muscles is predominantly causing this movement, right? It's the calf muscles, and the calf muscles consist of 2 muscles. The names are gastrocnemius and the soleus. And what is the movement that takes place here? It's plantar flexion. So it's very important to understand this. With this one here, this is now when we are looking at hamstring curls, all right, or this knee flexion machine. You're lying on your belly, you are hooking in your foot here, and you are bringing your foot from there into this position. So predominantly your hamstring muscle group is working predominantly because it's causing knee flexion. All right, what is the 3 muscles on the posterior part of your upper leg that's causing this movement? All right, already went through this. This is the three muscles. There, this is their names. And what is the movement taking place? It is knee flexion. All right. And this is also a hamstring curl, but it's just with not with a machine, but it's one with um, a Bosu ball, not a Bosu ball that you guys know, it's a gym ball. All right. So when you are taking your feet from this position to this position, your hamstring muscles is also working exactly like there, but it's working in another way. All right. And because this one is not connected to a machine, but it's on a gym ball, there's a lot of stability muscles that also needs to take part in this movement, causing um, your stabilizing muscles to work harder than when you are lying on the machine, and the machine provides all the stability. Um, all right, so you also need to know the difference between this here, this you're lying on the machine. The machine is creating stability for this person, so there's not really a lot of stability and postural muscles working to stabilize your body. But with this one here, there's a lot of stabilizing muscles um, working to support this movement and making it controlled. All right, and then we're looking at this exercise here. This is a seated leg extension. So you're sitting on the machine and you are hooking your foot behind this roller and you are lifting it up into this position here. And this is called knee extension, remember, because the angle between the two structures is increasing, causing knee extension. All right, so the only muscles working here really is the four quadricep muscles in the front of your upper leg, in the anterior part of your upper leg. All right. When we are doing this one here in the upward phase, in the downward phase, these muscles, remember what we spoke about, the glutes, the hamstrings, and the quads is responsible for this movement because it's not supported. There's no stability causing the stability of the exercise. Here, stability muscles is controlling this movement to be controlled and all of that. But you need to know what is the muscles that's causing this extension of the knee. All right. What is the names of the um, four quadricep muscles? All right. You also need to know cardiac output. All right. You need to understand cardiac output is the amount of blood that is pumped by the heart per minute. You need to know what is the formula. All right. Cardiac output is a Q. It stands for Q. So that's the formula. And heart, HR stands for heart rate. And this one stands for stroke volume. So, and remember the product means it is multiplication. So cardiac output is the product, it's multiplication of heart rate and stroke volume. That is the formula for cardiac output. You need to know what is the heart rate. It's the number of times your heart beats per minute. Stroke volume is the amount of blood pumped by your left ventricle every time your heart beats. Right? So you need to know what is the formula for cardiac output. Right? Then you also need to know the respiratory system. Right? You need to know what takes place at the alveoli. All right? What is the process that takes place when oxygen in the air gets diffused into the capillary, which is your blood, and carbon dioxide is taken out of the capillary, which means your blood, and it's going into the alveoli, out, and it's breathed out in the air that you breathe. So carbon dioxide is breathed out, oxygen is breathed in, right? And this takes place, gas exchange takes place at your alveoli. Alveoli is the small little air-filled bag that your lungs consist of. So it's called alveoli, and the process that takes place there is gas exchange. You need to know the difference between oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood, all right? Remember, we did go through this in the online recording in one of those videos under section 8. So it's important to know that oxygenated blood is blood full of oxygen and nutrients, and it's usually giving the color red, right? And then deoxygenated blood in the air or in the blood is carbon dioxide, which is CO2, and waste products, and it's usually given the color blue. You need to know the difference between an artery and veins, all right? That one is very important. You also need to know this, the last question that they gave you in the in Anin test 2, they asked you which heart chambers is directly in contact with the vena cava, which heart chamber is directly in contact with the aorta, which heart chamber is directly in contact with deoxygenated blood. So it's important to know those questions. That's how they ask about the heart and the chambers in the heart. And you also need to understand the exception. Remember, there's a specific exception. Arteries usually carries blood away from the heart, but this is the one exception where the artery actually carries blood towards the heart. And the vein usually carries blood towards the heart, but yeah, pulmonary vein is usually the opposite. So it's a vein that carries veins usually carries carbon dioxide and waste products, but this now is a vein that carries oxygenated blood full of nutrients and oxygen. So it is a exception because they call it a pulmonary vein, but it actually carries oxygenated blood. And they call it a pulmonary artery, but this one carries deoxygenated blood. So this is the only exception. So it's important to understand the exception. All right, you need to know how the blood gets circulated through your body, all right? From your lungs, through your heart, to the rest of your body. From the rest of your body, CO2 now gets taken back to the heart via the superior and inferior vena cavas. It gets taken into your right atrium, into the right ventricle. Remember, there's a one-way valve that causes the movement of the blood in one-way direction. And then from here, it goes back to the lungs. And this carbon dioxide and waste products gets expelled out of the lungs. And oxygen gets taken in again through the alveoli. And this whole process repeats itself. So it's important to go back to when I explained the heart circulation under section 8 so that you understand this one, because this is a very important picture to understand. All right. You also need to know the difference between the short-term response to exercise. All right. What happens in a short-term period directly when you start exercising? What happens to your cardiovascular system? What happens to your muscles? And what happens to your flexibility training? What happens to your joints range of motion? Sorry, I'm just busy with a class here. Yeah, you can sit there. All right, so it's important to go back to that online lesson and know the difference between a short-term response, all right, and the long-term adaptation that takes place. Remember, we said long-term adaptation is if you have a client over 3 months and you train him 3 times a week, what will take place in his body after 3 months? There will be certain adaptations. And I explained specifically the cardiovascular adaptation that will take place. Remember, your resting heart rate will decrease. You will have an increase in VO2 max. Hypertrophy. Remember, hypertrophy means your muscles increase in size and in number. And then here, your range of motion will increase. All right. there will be more functional activity because your joints will move more easily. Né? And then there will also be less strains, less tears, less tightness, less pain, less spasms, less cramping. So, yeah, this is the long-term adaptation, and you need to know the difference between the two. All right, then you also need to understand that the three energy systems and which one will be more predominantly active during what type of activity. All right, so we already spoke about anaerobic activities, which is your high intensity, explosive type of activities. All right, and then also we have our are aerobic activities, which is usually your activities that uses oxygen. It is a longer duration, slower intensity type of exercise, and you need to know which energy systems is predominantly active during which um, type of activity. All right, and you also need to know after how many seconds or after how many minutes the energy system will slow down and when will another system, the other systems, take more predominantly part in the energy production of your body. So yeah, that is the energy systems. All right, also remember what we spoke about. What you need to know, what is lipolysis, right? We already said when we spoke about glycolysis, we spoke about what does glycolysis mean. When we say lysis, lysis of this process means breakdown or disintegration, and lipo means fat. So when we say lipolysis, it means breakdown of fat for energy. So when we say lipolysis is taking place, your body is using fat to burn energy and to make energy. So that is something that you need to understand because the three energy systems, remember, oxidative energy system is the only energy system that uses protein, fat, and carbohydrates for energy breakdown. Glycolysis only uses carbohydrates, which is glucose, and then ATP one uses the creatine phosphate to make energy. So it's important to know this system is actually oxidative, the oxidative energy system. Sorry, I just lost it here. So lipolysis is actually the oxidative energy system, but it is just specifically referring to the breakdown of fats, the usage of fat during the system. And remember, this is now when we are doing more long-term, when you're running a marathon for a longer period of time, this is when lipolysis will usually start kicking in because that's how oxidative system works. Yeah? All right, so that is it, guys. So this is just a few pointers for you guys um, to just guide you in your studying. It doesn't mean you only have to study these things. You need to study everything, section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. But this is your points of focus that I want you to focus on and make sure that you know. All right. I will send you an email and let you know what day you're going to write your test on. All right. But yeah, that is it for today.